Hello everybody and welcome to the rugby discussion about wheelchair inclusivity. I've got Michael Pullman with me and hopefully we'll have Ronan joining us later. He's having a few technical issues. One of the things we've seen over the last few years is a lot more talk and a lot more display by the rugby teams and players about inclusivity. Recently, for example, the Super Rugby players were wearing coloured laces as a sign of the inclusivity of everybody. So what I wanted to do and having chat to these guys is to see what it's really like at the coalface. Is it just talking the talk, or are these clubs walking the walk? Michael and Ronan are both rugby fans and rugby journalists who get around on wheelchairs. And so let's see how they get on. Hi, Michael, how are you doing?
Really good, mate. Thanks for having me on the show.
Oh, it's brilliant. It's the so Michael, to give you some, just give people who don't know you a background, is a writer over here in New Zealand, covers the Chiefs and has covered the All Blacks, and gets accredited and gets access to them, unlike myself, who's just a amateur off the block. So I say he's the real deal. You put out an article earlier today talking about your access mainly as a journalist. There's a great photo of you there with Damien McKenzie doing interviews. So you mentioned there that you find all the players very happy and sort of come down to your level.
Yeah, definitely. I mean, every player that I've ever interviewed, especially at the Chiefs, has been, just really nice. And I guess the wheelchair's never really been a factor. They can sort of see that, obviously I'm sitting in it. So, yeah, we just sort of get on with it, and they'll sit down, or sometimes they'll kneel, or even stand. I don't really mind either way.
And one of the things you talk about in there is making sure that you've covered off everything with the press officer beforehand. So is that do you get access to training and stuff, and is access kind of around wet rugby pitches and wet grass and stuff a problem, or how does that all kind of work as well?
Yeah, I do go to all the media sessions that the Chiefs have here in Hamilton, and so they have a big training field, and so I can get onto that field, and because it's a proper rugby field, the grass is actually it's cut quite tidy, so no issues with getting stuck or anything. And yeah, I bring my support person with me, whoever's working that day, and like I said in my blog, I kind of just, if you have the conversation with the media manager beforehand, it makes things a lot easier.
Yeah, and you did a great story, a great comment about when it happened down in Rotorua. Do you want to take it? So when they're up in Hamilton, what's the kind of access like to the press room? And also, how do you get down? How do you sort of get from a place where you can view the pitch down to the interview rooms and that kind of thing? How does that all kind of work?
Yeah, so Waikato Stadium. I think my microphone is.
Okay, Ronan. I think we're getting echo from you, Ronan.
Sorry about that.
Cool.
All good.
So yeah, you might turn your volume down or put some headphones on.
Yeah. All right.
All good.
There you go. Hopefully that's better.
Yeah. So where was I?
Sorry, we're talking about access to Chiefs games at Hamilton.
Yeah. So at Waikato Stadium here in Hamilton, the press room is located up on level 5. So you get there for a lift. The only lift in the stadium, ironically, but so you go up to the top level, and the room it's actually really big. So there's a couple of very long desks, and there's TVs and stuff, and you have a really good view of the field. And then after the game, I just take the same lift back down to level 1, ground level, and you go through the tunnel, and there's a room off to the side where you do your interviews. So yeah, access from that standpoint it'd be better if they had more than one lift, because it's the same lift that all the corporate people use, and every other sort of man and his dog, and yeah, it's a tiny lift. You can probably get like 4 people in there, and when there's a wheelchair as well, you're lucky if you even get that. So can be a struggle, but getting to where I need to be is it's okay, I guess.
So just be aware that you have to be first there to the lift, because otherwise it gets full. Just for those people who haven't been to Waikato, it's not the biggest stadium in the world. They do have grass banks at each end, so I can understand why they wouldn't have lots and lots of lifts. It's also not that new a stadium, I don't think, either. I think it's been there a while. So that's by the way, Ronan, if you could just if you any shuffle, we'll flip the camera.
Okay.
Yep. So that's probably why it's like that. But you said so Waikato seems to work fine. What about the Rotorua one? This is a great story.
Yeah, so Rotorua International Stadium, 2015. It was my first year covering the team, and yeah, for whatever reason they shifted their game to Rotorua, and I wanted to cover it, because the application that I filled out for accreditation, that states all the home games, and particularly being my first year, I made an effort of going to everything I possibly could. As the newbie, wanted to get to know my peers and all that, and so I inquired about the going to Rotorua and found out, that the room wasn't accessible at all. I don't think the grandstand in Rotorua has actually got any sort of access at all. So at that point, I thought, well, there's no point in me driving, an hour and a half to Rotorua, and thought that would be that. And I just got a phone call from the media lady, and she says, "Oh yeah, we'll set you up with a table on the field." So I was actually behind the goalpost, like literally on the edge of the try line strip.
Wow.
So that was just surreal, like the fact that they, I don't know whose decision that was, but for them to be that accommodating. It was freezing cold. It was so cold I actually didn't even end up writing an article that night, because I started and I just couldn't finish. And yeah, that was, I guess that's the story. It's pretty cool.
No, it's nice to see that the Chiefs are making an effort to, even where the facilities aren't up to scratch, they're going the extra mile. They're putting in a table. I don't know if they ran any power or not, but they're doing what they can with the facilities they've got. When you were talking about the article about the All Blacks one, it sounds like where there's more people, it becomes a bit more of an issue for you than, because that's once the coverage for the Chiefs, the number of journalists that are there will be lower than when the All Blacks are playing, and it sounds like you got a bit crowded out, and people weren't quite so. Where the pressure was on to get the soundbite, people were perhaps a bit less aware of what was going on around them. Yeah,
the first time with the All Blacks at Eden Park, that was the opening test against the Welsh. So it's a lot of anticipation for that series, and Super Rugby media compared to international rugby media it's a completely different beast altogether. You've got every mainstream media out there in New Zealand there, and it was a bit of a disaster in a way, because I had made the same explanation that I did with the Chiefs. I said I need someone there. Is it accessible, and all this sort of stuff. And then they said to me, "We'll give you 5 minutes warning for when Kieran Reid was going to come over for the media scrum." So they, 5 minutes away, they said, "Come over here," and there's a microphone, like a standing microphone placed where Kieran was going to speak. So that was all good. I started out at the front, and he came over, and within probably 30 seconds, I was pretty much at the back of the scrum. People weren't necessarily climbing over me per se. It was more just shoving their way in, and then you've got all the microphones that obviously they can hold right up to his face. You've got TV crews, and Yeah, that was a real eye opener. But thankfully, the second time I did All Blacks here in Hamilton, with on models, because there weren't quite as many. Still have a lot of journalists, but it was a bit easier second time round. And yeah, I was a wee bit bummed, but like I said in my blog, the radio sport journalist Nigel Yolden, great guy, and he sort of came over and said, "Look, I'll give you my audio," and yeah, I got to write my story. And
Oh, that's cool. See, it's good that some people are looking up. So Ronan, Ronan is based up in Dublin, so obviously on the other side of the world. What's been your experience with getting access to players or on game days?
So I currently live in South Dublin at the moment, and I attend mostly Leinster matches. And the way that the Leinster pitch is set up, it's at the Royal Dublin Society, an old horse show ground, and they have one main stand that is an actual building that's actually built in the 1800s. So that itself doesn't have any accessible accommodations on it. It has terrace on the bottom and rickety old wooden seats on the top that they try and overprice for all of the unfortunate people sitting up there. And then they bring in 3 stands to put in on the other side of the stadium. None of them have accessible seating in the actual stand. All of the accessible seating is on the home sideline towards the end lines, towards the try zones. And it's just 2 concrete paddocks that they call accessible areas. They do their best, the stewards, to accommodate people. But the stadium's just so old, and it doesn't seem like they have the money nor the need to, with the number of wheelchairs that attend the game. There aren't too many in general to make better accessible accommodations there. It's easy enough to go to a game and watch, but to be able to handle press duties, it becomes really difficult because you're shoved down towards the end of the field. You don't get to see any of the action from above. You're trying to detail the game like what Michael was doing from the end of the pitch, where you don't get to see as much of the tactical formation of the game. You have to kind of judge things on where people are running their lines from a ground level. So you have to have a bit more of a not an intellect, but intuition for what the team really runs. The bird's eye view that most press boxes allow people to see down on makes it so that you're able to get a better scope of what the team's trying to play at. Whereas down on the floor, you kind of have to guess sometimes what formations they're trying to run at. So that's really the main problem that I've faced at Leinster. Everywhere else here seems to have press boxes that are accessible. They have, especially the Aviva, that's probably one of the best stadiums I've been to. They have plenty of elevators,
for those that aren't aware. And the Aviva Stadium is brand spanking new. It's only a few years old, relatively speaking, and you'd expect it to have top of the line accessibility.
Yes.
So there'd be no excuse with that one. I can see where. So you have press access. You're an accredited press person at the Leinster one, but there is no wheelchair press area. You're in with where the normal wheelchair fans would be, basically.
Exactly, yes. And most of the time what happens is if I go for a press accommodation, I have to tell them before each match a few days in advance that I have a wheelchair, that I am a member of the press section. And what they do is they actually have to check to see how many disabled tickets they've sold. And I've been refused from 2 games now because they've sold out their disabled allotment before the match, and they don't have it. They tell me that they can't legally provide me an area to put the wheelchair in because their disabled allotment is up, and they can't accommodate me anywhere close to the field because the removable stands that they put in are as close as they possibly can get to the field. So it's turned out 2 games now where I haven't actually been able to go in general at all to be able to do press duties because their disabled allotment has been sold. And then the only other problem, one of the other problems that I face there is the media center at the RDS has 7 steps to get up into the inside. And so all of the player interviews that take place in this media center are completely inaccessible. And I've tried to see if they would be able to bring 1 or 2 players outside, and they tell me that I can't do it. So if you're a supporter and you're not doing any press type related stuff, then you're fine. But if you're trying to be a member of the press, then you really have to be several days in advance checking the disabled allotment, and then just hoping that one of the stewards or one of the people within Leinster Rugby brings out the player to you, or any player that matter, to try and get an interview with them?
Wow. I'll be honest, I'm a bit shocked by that one. Clearly, I mean, if they're selling out their the wheelchair allotments, then they need to be expanding that and providing more. Just like if they're selling out, if you're selling out your seats, you extend your stand. So if you're selling out your wheelchair piece, you should be extending that. I guess one of the factors of this is probably that obviously Ireland have invested a lot of money into the Aviva Stadium and don't have a lot of spare cash to be throwing around at other stadiums, because I know they're trying to also Connacht's been extended as well. I believe they're probably putting a new ground out there. But even with those are more excuses rather than real reasons as to why they shouldn't be looking at extending or improving these things. I can understand why they could say legally I'm not allowed to do this in the short term, but to have it recur on a regular basis is poor. You go and you make changes structurally to
exactly. Yeah, that's something that I've been trying to bring up, trying to drive single-handedly, because I honestly don't believe, and Michael's probably experienced this too, that they've never had a member of the press in a wheelchair before, or disabled in any manner, that requires some sort of placement of a physical mobility help or device. And so I've been trying my best to try and spearhead this, but there's a certain bureaucratic and politics level that these clubs operate at, where it just takes a lot of time and a lot of work to try and change the way that it's done. And the RDS being such an old site in Ireland makes it even more difficult, because there's a antiquity to the stadium that they want to maintain. And so it almost feels like there's a certain reluctance to try and change anything towards better accommodations, at least for the press room. I do believe there's room to be able to put in other accessible areas in the stadium that they are missing out on, because there are places where it can be done, and I just feel like they don't do it because they don't feel a need for it. But that again is just another excuse. It doesn't matter if there's a need, or it doesn't matter if they don't feel there's a need for it. Michael and I can attest to the fact that there definitely are, and there needs to be changes for this kind of stuff, even if it's just small.
Yeah, actually, I'd love to chime in on that point. Speaking of the bureaucracy and all that, with the All Black situation with me, I sort of said to them, like, when they approved my accreditation, they only gave me accreditation. I didn't get a second, carer pass or anything. And I rang them and I said, look, I need an additional media. It's very, very difficult asking the All Blacks for that. But I said, look, I need a second accreditation pass. And it was probably a good 3 weeks of back and forth sort of discussion, and they wanted to know who the carer would be, all their details, photos, you name it. And I was sort of trying to say, look, I have a team of 8 staff. I have I don't know who's going to be working with me in 3 or 4 weeks time. So it was just, it was really, really difficult. And there were some that were concerned, I think, amongst the administration that, someone's going to get into the game for free and all this ludicrous stuff. And it does make it very hard.
Next time you should probably say that they're your carer and photographer. Yeah,
probably.
Because clearly someone took that photo of you with Damien McKenzie while you're doing the interview, and that kind of stuff is it also helps for the articles as well. But no, you seriously, you're right. They're not there for the free view. They are working. They may not even like rugby at the end of the day. It's so not everyone in New Zealand does, much to people outside, much to people overseas as shock and horror. So that's on the kind of the journalist side. I know we've kind of a long way in already, so I just want to have a talk about the access for as a fan, because that's what really kicked off my thoughts all around this. Was Ronan, when I saw your photo from the Aviva Stadium You were saying it was a wet day, but you're going to be dry because you were undercover. Is that common for wheelchair places to be normally undercover and have
Well,
it is a winter sport?
It depends on where you go. So if you're, I'm doing a semester abroad here in Dublin. So going to the Aviva, which you said is a newer stadium, it's only been open since the late 2000s, and so all of the wheelchair seating is under some sort of overhang, which for a country like Ireland it needs to be, because you can't have people getting rained on. So there are, I believe 95% of the wheelchair seats in the Aviva are under the overhang, and most of the time they will give you a selection as to which seats you want. So it's you'd have to go out of your way to try and choose the seats that are outside in the open. But I'm originally from San Diego, and in San Diego we have Qualcomm Stadium, which is a 1960s concrete donut-style multi-purpose stadium with outdoor seats, very, very bad open concrete areas, and it leaves you exposed to sunlight, rain, and just too much weather element for a lot of people in wheelchairs. So it's places I've more experienced it back in the States. Bad seating areas here in Ireland, other than the RDS, it's been pretty solid, but there have been several stadiums in the US where it leaves you very exposed to the elements, most usually on the West Coast, wind or sun. There was one time I was at a Chargers football game in San Diego with my father, and it was 90 degrees Fahrenheit outside, and we were sitting outside in direct sunlight, and I started nearly getting heat stroke, so we had to go and find an area under the overhang. So after that, I definitely had a newfound appreciation for areas of shade, and the more stadiums that I see that are being built now in the United States, especially with the wave of MLS stadiums, they have areas mostly of cover for wheelchair seats, which they're finding more and more are necessary, even if it's not raining outside. It's just, if you have shade, it helps people out in wheelchairs a lot more than it would first seem like.
Yeah, and I think the ones I've seen, I've noticed both at in the North Harbour Stadium and Eden Park, again, they're at the back, or they're towards the back of the stand, undercover next to the concourse. So you are undercover, you do get a view. But Michael, you were talking about the sort of sight lines from some of the places you've had to sit, because if you're out the back, there's an awful lot of people in front of you.
Definitely, and when people in the crowd stand up, it sort of impairs your vision. I remember first ever game I went to as a fan at Waikato Stadium. I still call it Waikato Stadium. I don't play this FMG Stadium crap. But yeah, anyway, I was so excited for this All Black game, and went there. Seats are pretty decent, really good view of the field. But as soon as the All Blacks took a break down the field, everyone stood up, and it was just lucky that I could see the big screen, see what actually happened, and even for like people like without physical disabilities. I mean, I know a guy who's visually impaired, and he's a fanatic of rugby, and he spends like hundreds and hundreds of dollars on a membership, and I don't know how he actually sees the game, but he enjoys it. But getting to his seat, like they've got a seat for a blind person, like down a flight of stairs. It's just, yeah.
No, I've heard of people buddying up with blind people at games, and so where the actual person stood next to them or sat next to them gives a running commentary of the game to the blind person, so they get to hear the atmosphere, feel the atmosphere, and also get told what's going on. I don't know if he has someone that does that for him, but that's something I've heard has happened in other sports.
Yeah.
And going back to, again, my stadiums of reference here in Ireland are the Aviva and the RDS. At the RDS, that's, I guess, one of the nicer parts about being at an old stadium like that, is that being right at the edge of the field, you don't have to worry about people standing in front of you. But the best part is at the Aviva, they've purposely sunk the row of seats in front of the wheelchair areas by 4 to 5 feet. So even if Kareem Abdul-Jabbar had stood up in front of me, I still would have had 2 or 3 feet of clearance to be able to see over the top of him onto the pitch. So it's things like that that make it suitable to view. I can attest to the same case as Michael when we were actually in Las Vegas for the USA Sevens, which I've gone out to for the past 6 or 7 years in a row, however long it's been since it's moved from San Diego. All of the seats are at the same level, including the wheelchair ones. So if any sort of big action comes along, then everyone stands up and you can't see anything for 10 meters in on the closest sideline. And you just miss out on all of that action. And it's just, you don't really realize it until you're in that position, but sinking that next level of seats down just by 2 to 3 to 4 feet makes all the difference in the world to be able to see over the top of the people below you.
And now you mention it, I remember in North Harbour Stadium that the wheelchair ones were much higher up, and they would have seen over. It hadn't really occurred to me at the time as to why they were that high. I'd assumed that was the rolling out off the concourse, but it wasn't. It was, as you say, it was to be higher up so you could see over the people, which is so again, at modern stadiums they seem to have thought about this. It's the older stadiums that don't have that kind of problem on the whole.
Exactly. But even then, with older stadiums, like I was in Crow Park, the Gaelic Athletics Association's stadium in North Dublin today, and looking at the wheelchair accessible seats, which I had our tour guide purposely go to so I could take a look at it. Their wheelchair seats are on the same level as the row in front of them, which makes absolutely no sense. But I've seen stadiums where they put in purpose-built ramps in the wheelchair section so that it raises you off the deck from where the concrete would be for a normal wheelchair section. And from what I can find in the research, it's not that expensive. So for an organization like the GAA or like the Irish Rugby Football Union, which do make a good amount of money, all things considered, they could afford this kind of technology or implementation of stadium platforms to be able to raise accessible seats up to a level that's suitable to be able to let people sit in comfort and not have to have wheelchairs that are movable up in the air, or have family members or caregivers ask the people in front of you to sit down, which I've definitely had to have happen in the past.
Cool. I think I've covered off on the things that I was thinking of talking about. Anything else you guys want to bring up?
I think parking is another thing. Like, having 4 or 5 wheelchair parks is not enough. The Hurricanes Chiefs game a couple of weeks back, when it was pouring with rain, man, absolutely pouring down. And I got there. I always get there an hour and a half early because I know if I'm any later, the parks are going to be gone. So, but for whatever reason that night I was late, and the security guy was like, "Oh, you'll have to park on the street," and the street to getting into cover from the rain is like, I don't know, 20, 30 meters, 40 meters. So yeah, I got drenched going. So they need to think about things like that. And I mean, yeah, everyone gets wet in the rain, but I mean, when you got a electronic wheelchair and that gets wet, things can get bad pretty quick.
Going on the route for electronic wheelchairs as well, I was just thinking about this. For people that use electronic wheelchairs, like I use an electronic wheelchair usually when I'm at rugby events because it's generally easier to be able to type and do stories and stuff like that from an electronic wheelchair. But the preconceived notion of people in electronic wheelchairs is that that most people that use them would have some sort of mental disability and not be able to comprehend the game of rugby. So I think there needs to be something done within rugby organizations to provide people in higher management positions with an inclination that people that are in wheelchairs that are either attending games or part of the press can't be babied, because that's something that happens much too often. People, I've had it happen with Leinster. The people working the press office treated me at first almost as though I couldn't understand for myself what was going on. So if they could just get it in their heads that we are able to do the jobs that we're out to do, then I think it would help out a lot. It would go a long way if they comprehended the fact that we are doing our jobs like normal members of the press and not like disabled reporters.
And I think also that sort of ties into not the treating you like baby, but this whole sort of tension, I think, between the mainstream media and our kind of media. You know, we're still learning, you know, and we're website guys, you know, and yeah, it's intimidating going in there. But I think if, like I said, you know, in my thing, like, just, you don't need, you know, just go with it, man. And yeah.
There's definitely a tension between the sort of blogging, podcasting, new age media and the sort of the established papers and TV media. I remember one writer complaining that Canterbury had done a shirt launch and that they'd only invited podcasters and bloggers and they hadn't invited any of the actual mainstream media, which shows the way that these sort of things are starting to go. But that's, I guess, that's a separate issue. It's interesting. Wasn't so you're saying that the information provided and the expected level of knowledge from the press officers was lower because you're in a wheelchair, which is just crazy. Whilst you might not have played rugby, or maybe even the reason you're in the wheelchair is because you have played rugby and you've had an injury. So that's just blows my kind of mind. Any last points, and then I think we'll probably wrap that up.
Yeah.
No, I think I'm pretty good, actually. It's good to be able to talk this kind of stuff out, because it's something that needs to be addressed, especially if more people that are using wheelchairs or that have disabilities want to be able to be in full engaged members of the press. And I definitely have encouraged more people to try and get out there and do it, because I got injured in a rugby match. That's the reason why I'm in a wheelchair, and it didn't stop me from trying to be involved in rugby. It only pushed me to become even further involved. And so it definitely hasn't stopped me from trying to push on and become a member of the press. And if I can help out in any sort of way possible, then I'll keep doing this.
That's great. Thank you guys for your time. It has been enlightening for me, and hopefully for the viewers as well. Why don't you let them know if they want to have a chat with you, how to get in touch with you, Mike?
Yeah, so you can follow me on Twitter. My handle is @RealMikePullman, and I'm also on YouTube as well. My channel is Mike Pullman. Oh, sorry, it's the Real Mike Pullman as well. It's just changed, but yeah, like my mate here, we write a lot on social media, so you can find us there.
And Ronan, your Twitter handle and everything else?
Yeah, and for me, my Twitter handle is Ronan_Nelson, and I regularly write for RugbyWrapUp.com. I do more of their European contributions here, and I just want to give a quick shout out to Nick Serro at USA Rugby, because he's been one of the most instrumental people in facilitating an easy access to rugby for me in the United States, especially with my wheelchair. So just want to say thank you to him and to all the people that have helped me out abroad and back in the States.
Great, thank you. I'm obviously Dryden Wall on all social media platforms and my website. You can also find links to the guys' Twitter accounts in the notes below. Please do subscribe and share this with all your friends. Let's get the word out there about this. Next week, at half an hour later than this one, I'll be having a chat with a female reporter about her experiences and her inclusivity of female reporters. She used to write for the Sports Illustrated, something proper. So she has got great experience. So dial in for that one, and that'll be great. Just a couple of comments that I'm seeing on the live chat. Josh Bremer says Bath versus Tigers at Twickenham. They had great access, and again, Twickenham is a new stadium that has been that has had a lot of upgrades. If you didn't get great access at Twickenham, I would have been shocked. But it's great to see that that's there. And Strobro, I thought this was going to be about wheelchair rugby. No, it's not. We're talking about wheelchair access. And apparently the US Americans with Disability Act would have a part of that. Yes, legal stuff is also driving this, not just clubs wanting to do the right thing. Thank you very much for your time. I say join me next week for the rugby discussion, and also check out our Twitter handles. There's all sorts of rugby chat going on, and see you all next time.
Thank you.
Cheers, mate.